Welcome to the Live Well podcast, dedicated to helping those with autoimmune disease get control of their health through diet, lifestyle shifts, and personal empowerment. I'm Christina Tidwell, your host. I'm a registered nurse and holistic health coach who is passionate about bringing together the best of both conventional and complementary approaches to healing. You can learn more about my personal experience with autoimmune disease at my website, christinatidwell.com. Just a brief disclaimer, I'm not a doctor or naturopath, and the opinions presented here are personal and are not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your doctor and your care team before making any changes to diet and lifestyle to make sure they are right for you. All right, let's get to it. Good morning. So I was just over on Instagram, and Lisa had asked me a question over on Instagram about autoimmune disease, and she asked me if everyone with autoimmune disease needs to avoid or eat the same foods. And I thought it was a really good question, and instead of just answering to her, typing out a whole thing, I thought I would just jump on here and explain it a little bit more, because it's something that people ask me quite a bit. So I want to bring a little bit more clarity to this. So it's a great question. Does everyone with autoimmune disease need to avoid the same foods? And so when we think of autoimmune disease, we can consider that there's kind of a three legs to it. It's like a three-legged stool, and sort of three things need to be in place for the development of an autoimmune disease. So the first one is genetics. We definitely inherit genes to make us more susceptible or predisposed to developing an autoimmune disease. So that's there. We have that. But our genes are not our destiny, and there's other pieces that determine the ability of our bodies to turn on or off autoimmunity. So the other two pieces that we need to consider have to do with digestive health, which might not be something that you previously thought. We usually only think about our digestive health when something bad is going on, like food poisoning or something where we can really feel it in our digestion. But our digestion really affects our whole body, and especially our immune system. So the other two pieces to this three-legged stool are having some digestive issues, intestinal permeability or leaky gut, which you may have heard about before, but having some digestive dysfunction there, which is causing our immune system to react around the tissues surrounding our digestive system, and also an imbalance in the good and bad bacteria in our gut. So it's kind of setting up this environment for our immune system to be activated or go on overdrive, because as we know, 70% of our immune system lies in the area around our gut. So anytime anything's going on with our immune system or we're experiencing symptoms of autoimmunity, we always want to look to the gut. So whenever we're considering what you should eat or avoid with an autoimmune disease, firstly, everyone is totally different. And I know you've probably heard me say that about a million times, but it's really important that we know that and remember that we are all so different. So if we're online and we're reading all these different things about what worked for one person, and we try and apply it to our lives, or what worked for our friend, and we try and use it on us and it doesn't work super well, that's okay. And it doesn't mean that you're completely unfixable and doomed. It just means that you haven't found what's going to work for you. And so that's the real journey, is figuring out what works for you. That being said, though, there are a couple things that you can consider if you're someone with autoimmune disease in terms of your diet. So the first three main things, the main categories of food are that you would want to consider avoiding with an autoimmune disease are sugar, dairy, and gluten. And those are some of the most inflammatory foods. So anytime someone has a lot of symptoms of autoimmunity and they're just wondering, what do I eat to make myself feel better? How do I transition to a healthier diet? I always say, focus on those first. See where you're at with that first. And the reasons being, we know sugar, a lot of really highly processed sugary foods aren't super nutrient dense, don't have a lot of good nutrients for us. So we're not getting all of the building blocks and the pieces we need to help our bodies at a cellular level, and also help our immune system, help regulate our immune system. So that's one piece of the sugar part. The other piece of sugar is that increased consumption of sugar is going to mess with our blood sugar regulation. So that can look like insulin resistance, having high or low blood sugar levels, and even diabetes. So regulating blood sugar levels and maintaining insulin sensitivity are really critical pieces to regulating the immune system and reducing overall inflammation. So we know that about sugar, and we might already kind of know that. We feel a little bit better when we're removing some of these really highly processed, refined, sugary foods. The second piece is gluten. And so we hear a lot about gluten, and it's like, okay, who has to cut it out? Who doesn't? What if I don't have celiac? If you're someone that is experiencing autoimmunity, which means you're likely experiencing some gut issues, even if you don't have really overt digestive issues, if we're considering gut health, gluten can be something that you want to limit. And there's a lot of research out there now that tells us a little more about why. So there's a component in gluten called gliadin. And so gliadin fragments, when we eat gluten, cross this gut barrier we have in our intestines. And these protein fragments, gliadin fragments, interact with the immune system tissue surrounding our gut. Like I said, 70% of our immune system lies outside of our gut. And they can start to release inflammatory cytokines, activate both innate and the adaptive immune system, so two branches of our immune system, and potentially exacerbate this leaky gut or intestinal permeability. So that you can see how that might be problematic for those with leaky gut, digestive issues, and then autoimmunity when we're thinking about it as that three-legged stool. And so with gluten, it's just something to consider, if you are dealing with these symptoms of autoimmunity, potentially removing it for a period of time and noticing how you feel. That's really the only way that you can tell. I mean, there are food sensitivity testings and things like that, but really the gold standard is removing something for a period of time and then adding it back in to see how you feel. And the third thing is dairy. So you probably heard me talk about dairy before. Dairy is so bio-individual. It's so different, but it can be a really allergenic food. So if you are sensitive to it, or you have an allergy or sensitivity to it, you want to avoid it, so you're not constantly stimulating this response. And I think about 25 to 75% of people, depending on ethnicity, are unable to really digest lactose, the sugar found in milk. So it can be kind of problematic for digestion. And dairy can also increase mucus production, which can further irritate the gut lining and hinder nutrient absorption. So a big issue when we're dealing with autoimmunity or gut issues is making sure we have all the right nutrients, micronutrients, to give to our body, so our immune system can regulate itself properly, because it's not, and in the case of autoimmunity, it's not regulating itself properly. So dairy, totally different too, but if you're someone with autoimmunity and gut issues, that's definitely one to consider, and one of those top three to consider removing for a period of time, and then reintroducing back in to see how it makes you feel and how you do with it. From there, after we kind of look at these big three, it gets a little bit trickier because everyone's really different. So I think when Lisa was asking me this, she was asking me in terms of like the autoimmune paleo diet. You may have heard of that, where you're avoiding a lot more foods like grains, legumes, eggs, nightshades, which all of these are foods that have the potential to cause an inflammatory or immune response in the body. So if you have a compromised digestive system and your immune system isn't being regulated properly, these are foods that have been identified that can possibly contribute to this. And so by removing them for a period of time, you're giving your body a break to not have this sort of constant stimulation. And then at the same time, you're putting in really good nutrient-dense foods, so you're giving your body all the micronutrients and good stuff it needs to be able to do what it needs to do and regulate itself and the immune system. So really everyone's so different. Not everyone necessarily needs to just jump right into a restrictive healing protocol diet, because honestly, maybe the stress of doing something like that, if you're not prepared, is gonna make it way worse than if you were to just start a little bit more gentle and consider your diet. So it's really gonna depend on where you already are, what you're eating, what your symptoms are, which autoimmune condition you have, which, our autoimmunity, the condition that you have depends on which area of the body and which tissues your immune system is activated against. So it's really going to depend what's going on for you and what are the underlying causes of autoimmune disease as well. So I think to answer Lisa's question, it would be best to just start with those top three: dairy, gluten, sugar, kind of top inflammatory foods, and really get a handle on those. And then from there, yeah, maybe you do want to jump in and do some sort of healing diet, like an autoimmune protocol. There's specific carbohydrate, there's like Wall's protocol, there's all these different type of healing diets, but the same idea in all of them is to remove inflammatory triggers for a period of time and flood the body with really good nutrients to help it do what it does best. And so I really highly suggest, when embarking on one of these healing diets, to be able to customize it to yourself, to work with someone. I did that back in the day, and it made all the difference and made things so much easier, as opposed to just having this template of like, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. It helped to work with someone to consider me specifically, my physiology, my life, what's realistic and what's not realistic. You know, like I said, stress is a huge thing. If someone's like, okay, I'm going to jump into doing this autoimmune paleo diet tomorrow, but it's really overwhelming because it's like, what are my kids going to eat? You know, how am I going to source food at work? How am I going to do all this? There's, you know, realistic components that we need to address before. So definitely I suggest working with someone. And if you want more help on this, definitely send me a message, or you can send me an email to info@christinatidwell.com. I can help brainstorm, hear more about where you're at, and help brainstorm just how to incorporate healthy whole foods into your life realistically, and consider a game plan that's going to work best for you, which is going to be different to your friend who told you about the supplements and the diet she tried and worked. It's going to be different to me. It's going to be different to someone else with your exact same diagnosis. So I just want you to know that it really needs to be tailored and individualized. And so I've got a waiting list going right now for next month for anyone that wants to work with me in any capacity. So definitely get in touch. I know this is a big question that a lot of people have. It can be overwhelming. There's lots of good information out there, but there's lots of information out there. So I hope that this helped clear it up just a little bit. Kind of focusing on those main three foods and whys. Sometimes it really helps to know why you're avoiding these things, so it doesn't just seem like you know, one big cruel trick to like not have your cookies or avoid gluten or whatever. We always have to consider why we're doing something and what's actually happening physiologically when we do or don't eat something. So I hope that helps give more clarity. Let me know if you have any other questions in the comments. Or this is something that you've thought about before as well. All right, thanks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Live Well podcast. I'm so happy to have you here as part of the tribe. If you're looking for more guidance on how to take control of your health through diet, lifestyle, and personal empowerment, you can visit me at christinatidwell.com, or book in a free 30-minute discovery call to get clear on your main health concerns and create a plan of action specifically for you by going to christinatidwell.com/livewell. For daily tips on how to pursue health while still enjoying yourself, follow me at livewell_Christina on Instagram. I can't wait to connect with you and hear your story.